Hey guys, welcome back to Cheney's TCG store. I am here today with a competitive tier list for decks that are currently in the format right now, or decks that maybe some of you are playing. No doubt I'm missing some decks, so try not to flame me if I'm not showcasing your deck that you're playing right now. But if I'm not showcasing the deck that you're playing right now, let me know in the comment section what you're playing. I am going to be doing this as a premiere, as you'll know when the video pops up, just so I can discuss decks with people, or if there's disagreements or agreements. I like discussing this kind of stuff with you guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this tier list. I apologize in advance for all the craziness going around this tier list as far as advertisements, but that's kind of the way these things go. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into this. So instead of doing a tier like 1.5 or a tier 0, we don't really have a true tier 0 deck right now. So I just didn't add that. But as far as tier 1.5, I mean, I kind of just going to lump that into tier 2, or if it's really close to tier 1, we'll just put it in tier 1. And then non-competitive is anything that I haven't really seen top in a long time, or I just don't see any representation as far as in the competitive scene. But going to the list now, we have Phantom Knights first. And although this hurts, I'm going to say this is at the top of tier 2. It hasn't topped in a long time. I haven't seen it top in any YCS in a long time. Maybe there was one here or there that I missed, but this deck was supposed, people really thought this was going to be the tier 1 deck to beat this format. And it did see a lot of representation in the beginning of the format, but it just kind of fell off. There were other strategies that kind of, I guess it was really the adventure token package that like everybody thought it's going to make Phantom Knights broken, but there was actually other strategies that popped up that could use it really well, in addition. But I mean, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it. It's a solid, competitor. If you go locals, you're still going to top, most likely. But it definitely has its weaknesses, and one of the main weaknesses is you need to be able to play a lot of hand traps this format, and this deck just really can't, especially when it's playing the adventure token package. This deck can play board breakers, but it really can't play hand traps, or at least not too many, without taking away combo pieces where it's going to be a lot less consistent. So that's where we find ourselves at with this deck. If we get back to a format where hand traps aren't as prevalent, I think this deck can still shine, but right now it's just not cutting it. So here, this is Water Enchantress, but it's going to represent based for the purposes of this. Based is tier 1. I don't think, maybe even a step. Now we'll say tier 1 for now. It's doing well, and I've seen it in a lot of top cuts for YCSs and regionals. And it's still doing well now that we have like the Despia branded stuff as well. And I see it staying there until we see a ban list, any ban list additions from this deck. But yeah, super powerful deck, and it will continue to do well. Next is Swordsol. And that's going to be more towards the bottom of tier 1, mainly like the more heavy Tinny based Swordsol decks. The ones that are playing a very large Tinny package and a smaller Swordsol package with your 3 incredible Ecclesias. The deck is really, really good. It doesn't make a crazy board, but with what it does do, it makes it very consistently. And it's able to play every turn, and it cycles very well. And it's a hard deck to beat, especially with the Vishudo and stuff like that being able to pop. It's very, very good. And then as well, there are some Swordsol variants that are playing the adventure package as well, which can be very good. And if you're going that route, you definitely do want a smaller Swordsol package because you're not able to get normal summon effects off like Noye. Next is Eldlik. I would put that a tad a bit in front of Swordsol, but it's kind of hit or miss. Like I've seen events where there's 30%, 20 to 30% representation, but then also events where it's flip-flopped and Swordsol sees a bunch of representation in top cut. But really they're almost like neck and neck. This Eldlik was pulling ahead for a little while, But it's just kind of how the format's been. There's not really been one deck that wins it all. Next, Despia, and I'm going to put that a step above. I don't think it's it could be close to tier 0, but so far I've seen one event there'll be 50% representation in top 8, which is technically tier 0, but then I'll see the next event that it's only at 25% representation in top 8. So until we see it hit that 50% plus a lot more consistently, it's just not to tier 0 yet. And then you also have to remember we do have Splites coming, which is going to put a big check on this deck into either the tier 1, tier 0.5 status. So we'll have to see. Next is Flunderies, and Flunderies I also believe is a tier 1 deck, and I don't know if everybody's going to agree with me on that. But this deck plays through Scythelock. It plays one of the best disruptions is going to be Artifact Lancia, and this still plays well through that. It's a very, very hard deck to stop. And there are very, very bad matchups. I've seen Flunderies beat Albaz. It's just not a very good matchup, really. So yeah, I don't know. I think Flunderies is a great deck. I don't know if there's not really the only thing I see with Flunderies, the only problem is it just doesn't see a lot of representation. There really aren't a lot of fans of the deck, and that's really where it suffers. Whereas with Despia, you're going to have tons of people playing it. And since tons of people are playing it and it's a very good deck, you'll see a high representation and the top 8. Whereas Flunderies, there's not as many people playing it, even though it's a powerful deck. So there's just less decks. Like say if you had locals, you had 4 people playing Despia and 1 person playing Flunderies, but Flunderies got second place and Despia got first, third, and fourth. It looks like Despia is a tier 0 deck, but it's just representation. It's not necessarily technically a better deck, but it just sees a lot more representation. So I think until this deck sees a lot of representation, it's not going to be the top contender or even be top 2 or 3 contender. Next, I have Shaddolls, and this can be any variant like the Alistair, the invoked variant, branded variants. I think the most powerful one right now, but just really any variant. I think this is a good tier 2 to rogue deck. I would say rogue because it's not very represented, and kind of part of this is representation. Even you have lower levels of representation of Flunderies, it's just such a powerful deck that it deserves its spot. I would really say that Flunderies is kind of more towards tier 1.5, but it's closer to the 1 than it is the 2. And as far as results, it has consistently gotten tops. ABC Dragon Buster, I think there is some support coming out in Dimension Force for like the Earth Machine or like machine monsters, but we don't know what the deck's going to do yet. So I'm going to put that in non-competitive for now. They just really got hurt with the what is it called, Union Carrier, getting banned. Before it was like kind of like a good rogue deck, really good rogue deck, and we're just not seeing it do well right now. Altergeist is also going to hit rogue. Very powerful deck, but it's just overshadowed right now in representation and power levels by Eldlik. Most trap players are going to choose to go with Eldlik over this. But I'm sure everybody's familiar with Altergeist. Just a lot of people hate it, so it just never sees a lot of representation. Next is going to be Prank Kids. Prank Kids is want to move it here. It's kind of fallen off a little bit recently in the last couple of ones I've seen, but yeah, I'd say it's almost tied with Based, maybe even Eldlik. Still a tier 1 deck. Unfortunately, I didn't add like every archetype in here, so it is going to maybe look heavier towards tier 1. There's a lot of contenders up there that like every event I see, like maybe Sky Striker gets top cut, or Eldlik gets a bunch of top cut, or Flunderies gets a bunch of top cut. So it's kind of a pretty diverse format, if you would say. Like not really. I mean, a lot of people doesn't feel like a diverse format, but it kind of is when you really stop and think about it as far as what's making it to top cut. It's not 2 or 3 decks. It kind of has some variety. Next is Alistair and Friends. If you're playing the like Alistair Shaddolls, yeah, I would put that in Rogue as well. I wonder why tier 2 is really small, but I mean, I kind of don't really know what all. I might end up moving Flunderies down, but for now, we'll just kind of get these on the board, and then I'll come back and decide if that's right. Dragon Link, solid tier 2 deck. Still sees lots of representation, still sees lots of play. It's rarely making it into top cut though, but I have seen it a few times. Dynamorphia, I mean, right now, because we don't have support, it's in non-competitive. Basically, if you're playing Dynamorphia, you're playing branded right now, which means, or Brave Token, which means you're kind of just like there's no reason to play it right now because you get there's like no bonus to playing it right now except for burning for a little bit of points and having a high attack monster. When it gets the rest of the support in Dimension Force, it'll be a different story. But also I do want to see results at actual tournaments before I decide where we put it, because it could be an insane deck in theory and it never, turn over events. So we'll have to wait and see. Tri Brigade, it's just been a solid tier 2 deck. Still sees lots of representation, just not punching through to the top level. I've maybe seen one top in recent history. Virtual World actually just got a big, I think 1 or 2 positions in the top 8 for this last event. I think it was Guadalajara, maybe, or no, maybe it wasn't. It was a different one. Still think that's a solid tier 2 deck. Sky Striker, I'm really stuck in between here because it just did do really well over the weekend. But I don't really know where representation is at. It feels like a rogue deck, so that's where we're going to land it. But we're going to put this, I guess kind of tied with Branded Shaddol or Invoke Shaddol. I'm actually going to put Alistair and Friends ahead of this. That feels better. So Infernoble, I mean, it's a rogue deck. I just really haven't seen anybody play this at locals. Like, let me know if you're an Infernoble player, but I just haven't seen any representation, so I can't tell you what it's doing. I do know that it plays the Auroradon combo, so like it's pretty much going to be able to do what most synchro decks are doing right now, but just doesn't do it as well or consistently. Like, it really lost its power level when Smoke Grenade got banned and all those other things. A Chi-Chi, and this can also represent other Cyberse decks that are decent. Rogue, it kind of just puts up the towers, but there's ways to get around that, but it can play a lot of hand traps first of all, and now that has Heat Soul, it's going to be able to get a lot of draw power to get into those hand traps. And then besides that, I don't know, this is just a hard deck to play against. It really is, and it just doesn't see a lot of representation, but I think it's one of those decks that can sneak through, and it was sneaking into top cuts not a long time ago, but last year. Orchest, also going to be down here in Rogue. It needs hard forward back to really be considered viable for tier 1 or tier 2 play. Earth Machine, I'm going to put that in tier 2 because it does see quite a bit of representation and it does see results. I have seen a couple of top cuts here and there, and it's got new support coming. Like I said, I don't want to count new support coming because this is a list as of now, not in the future. Otherwise, this list would be infinite with Splight and everything else. So that's what feels good for now. Adamantipator feels like top of non-competitive. I mean, it is still competitive. It's just like We'll just talk a little bit about it. So it's still powerful and it can create very powerful boards. The problem is there's a lot of hand traps in the format right now. And if you break their board, like if you nib them or you droplets them, they have 0 way to recover. And then that way it's just super dangerous to play. I've seen people get lucky and be able to build, like, do build a board workshop and lock people out playing. But I've also seen more often than not their board getting broken and having no follow-up play. So this is going to go bottom of Rogue here. I would actually rather play Orcus than Adamantipator right now. Necroz. So I'm going to put this in non-competitive. Doesn't really matter where. These aren't like tiered anyway down here. But interestingly enough, I think a Necroz deck got first place this weekend in an event. But it wasn't Necroz per se. It was like Brave, Necroz, something. It was like 3 decks together. So I don't really count that as. Oh, it was Drytron, Brave Token, I believe, and Necroz. Necroz for sure was in there, but I don't really count that as a Necroz deck. That's just kind of like a pile deck. Drytrons though. Tier 2 is fine. I feel like this deck still does a lot. It just has it kind of has a lot of potential too. Like I feel like it's a little bit underplayed. I feel like it could use a little bit more representation. It's just able to cycle pretty well. Even though you're not being able to put up a huge board, to me, it kind of falls into something like Dragon Link or Tri-Brigade being able to cycle or even Swordsol for that matter, being able to cycle every turn very well. And that's kind of a requirement for a good deck this format, is you really need to be able to play every turn. It's just like Despia, it's not going to kill you on turn 1, but it's able to play extremely well every single turn and beat you in the long game. And that's kind of where we're at, which is like a mid-range format, which is what I personally really enjoy. I do think the ban list needs to shake things up for us, but it's not a bad format to play in. And I'm just glad it's not like pure combo or pure control, like kind of mid-range, like allows everybody to have fun. Like, if you're looking at Eldlik or you're looking at base, like 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, but both are extremely fun and competitive. Next is Zodiac. I'm going to say non-competitive here because they don't have Trident anymore, which is kind of the main thing. So it's just kind of a Zeus turbo, but I kind of feel like that's not enough really, because you're playing against decks that can cycle very well. And yeah, Zodiac's just not cutting it. This deck used to be like when we had Trident and Barrage and stuff, like that's all you really needed for this deck to take off with that Zeus turbo style deck, because you could play a ton of hand traps, a lot of solemn strikes and stuff like that, and really control the game. It's not that it was never the funnest deck to play like that. Like it was definitely better when it was a tier 0 deck or tier 0.5 when it first came out, but it's still kind of a powerful rogue deck when they did have Trident. Especially in Tri-Brigade, it was tier 1 with as an engine in Tri-Brigade, but not pure. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this tier list. There is a lot of tier 1 decks, but that's because these all kind of go head to head and able to compete with each other. And like I said, some of these tier 2 deck just means, in my opinion, is a deck that can still compete with tier 1, but they just see less representation, 1, and 2 aren't seen in top cut as often. These 6 really are going to be seen in top cut fairly often, and these are less often. You don't see it as much. Rogue is just like every once in a while it gets a top, and yeah, so I think that's where we sit. Even Orcus, I feel like the Rogue is kind of hard category, because it's like, for me as a competitive player, I think of Rogue as something that people are still bringing to YCSs and regionals and playing, and are occasionally able to kind of combat the meta. But at the same time, technically anything that doesn't see a lot of representation would be considered Rogue. But that's why I kind of have this other non-competitive tier, or I guess I should have just called it like maybe more casual rogue. Probably would have been the better title. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you agree, if you disagree. I actually do need to change. We'll change this order up a little bit. I do think Tri Brigade outperforming Dragon Link a little bit. Virtual World and Dragon Link kind of tied, because Virtual World has done really well in a couple of recent matches. Besides that, I think I've covered most decks here. If I'm missing something, just let me know. There's probably something blatantly obvious that I'm missing. Hopefully I'm not. But yeah, that's the tier list as I see it. Like I said, some of these might be a little out of order as far as like in their actual tier, but I think this looks pretty good. But thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would. And let me know what cards you guys want me to go over next Market Watch. Or if you enjoy these type of tier lists, I can do tier lists for other categories as well. But I think it's super cool. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.